Watch later was the beginning. Question 1. YouTube gives every content consumer two built-in anchor playlists out of the box: liked videos and watch later. For most people, watch later becomes the default answer to "I want to come back to this." So what is watch later actually doing for you as a content consumer? And at what point does it stop being a solution and start becoming a problem? The first thing Watch Later is doing for you is providing a cognitive offload. And that is the most important part. It is the cognitive offload of what you would be consuming versus what you would be watching versus what you would be scrolling. So many content consumers are watching a video and scrolling at the same time, and they find themselves stuck. Hey, I want to watch this, but I'm already watching this. Do I click into the new video and just leave it in my watch later? Or do I actually click into it to include it in my watch history? Or is my watch history paused because I'm changing up my recommendation feed and I have different heuristics at play? That is the cognitive weight that Watch Later is absorbing for you. It lets you offload the decision. It lets you say, not now, but I'm not losing this. The second thing Watch Later is doing for you is influencing your recommendation feed. Back when I first started using YouTube, the platform did not surface things from your Watch Later into your recommendation feed. Now, they've started to do that. They've started to use playlists to influence your consume digest in the form of your subscription box, in the form of your home screen. They surface watch later videos as a part of that continuity. So we now have to manually go in and click into playlists, both internally and externally, to influence the recommendation feed we get over time. That is actually why I started creating playlists to begin with. I wanted YouTube to use the playlists I created in order to condition what I was being recommended. To what extent they've actually built a back-end heuristic around internal playlists, I don't fully know. But the watch later surfacing is real, and that's been useful. So cognitive offload and feed influence. Those are the two things Watch Later is doing for you as a content consumer. Now, at what point does it stop being a solution and start becoming a problem? The range where it caps over about 1,000 videos is when it stops being a solution. When it takes so long to scroll to the end of the playlist, when you're on mobile and you can't see the titles and thumbnails without scrolling for what feels like minutes, that is the threshold. On desktop or tablet, things might be different. You have more screen real estate, different navigation, but on mobile, once the scroll distance becomes prohibitive, the cognitive offload has flipped into a cognitive burden. The watch later was supposed to free you. At 1,000 videos, it starts holding you down. Question 2. Watch later scales badly. Add consistently for 6 months and you have hundreds of videos with no structure, no category, no real way to discover or recover what you saved and how you saved it. And here's the thing, you cannot delete watch later. It's baked into the foundation of the platform. So what does that mean? What does it mean that YouTube gives you a bin but not a system? And what does that design choice tell you about how the platform thinks about you as a content consumer? For me, it means that YouTube thinks differently about content consumers than content consumers think about themselves. It means that YouTube is itemizing us as passive content consumers because they like to keep us in that realm. Now, it's hard to say that they're not serving us because the platform is built around us having an experience, but at the same time, we're not really being served as well as we could be. Because they are optimizing for things that don't necessarily include the health of the content consumer. They're optimizing for time spent on the platform. They're optimizing for retention time. And that's not necessarily the best thing for the content consumer looking to discover those unknown unknowns. The content they didn't know they needed, the creators they didn't know existed, the ideas that were just outside the edge of their current frame of reference. That is super important. The unknown unknowns are super important. And tweaking the algorithm so that you get a wider variety of content over time based on your interest that requires deliberate intervention. It doesn't happen by default because the platform is not optimizing for it. For most people are not YouTube premium subscribers. That means they are dealing with ad placement. And ad placement means the platform would much rather push people into higher performing videos because high performing videos carry better ad rates, which generates more revenue. And if they can get people to follow the expert content creators who produce rabbit holes, one video to the next, to the next, to the next, then they are legitimating the cybernetic feedback loop. The loop where the platform decides what you want. The loop where your watch history becomes the ceiling of your discovery. The loop where the bin, the watch later, just keeps filling up, never becoming the system. That is what it means that YouTube gives you a bin and not a system. It means the platform is okay with passive content consumption because the linear version of content consumption has always served their interests. But now, as we evolve past content consumers into content curators, we start using different things within the cybernetic ecology. Things like playlists, things like different aspects of technique deployed in context. And that's where the posture shifts. Here's the inversion. Most people accept the bin. The power of a playlist, the power of as an aggregator is to transform a bucket into a bin, into a system. This is the move. That is the entire counter posture. You take what the platform gave you as a default and you decide you're going to build something deliberate on top of it. Not because the platform asked you, but because you decided the platform's default isn't good enough for what you're trying to do. Question number 3. The origin of as an aggregator runs directly through watch later, because watch later was the first word available to describe the experiencing of wanting to hold on to content. So walk through that origin. What was the specific moment where watch later stopped being enough? And what question did you ask yourself that opened up an entirely different way of thinking about playlists? The honest answer is I'm not completely sure which came first. And I want to hold on to that uncertainty rather than smooth it over because the uncertainty is actually part of the story. Here's what I do know. It started with subscription velocity. The subscription velocity rate was increasing so much that I knew I would begin losing access to what was being published. I had subscribed to creators because their content mattered to me. I didn't ever want to miss the continuity of what they were putting out. And the subscription box, the feed itself, was moving faster than I could manage it. So I had to act. I think it started with a category-specific quick pick. I think it started before the term quick pick even existed. It was just a category-specific playlist, either a news playlist or a culture commentary playlist. Something that said this category of content needs its own container. The watch later was absorbing everything, and everything absorbing into one bucket was becoming unnavigable. Now, whether the category specific name came first or the ASAP quick pick came first, that's the chicken and the egg. but I think it was the category specific, but I'm holding on to that provisionally. What I know is that both emerged from the same recognition. I needed more than one kind of container. I needed a container for what I wanted to consume as soon as possible, and I needed containers for the categories of content I was tracking over time. That's when the thinking about playlist types really started. That's when it stopped being just watch later and started being something else. And that something else came with its own problems. Because once you start creating playlists, you start running into the playlist velocity problem, rate at which playlists accumulate. If you are creating too few, each one fills up faster than you can navigate it. If you're creating too many, this is the real ceiling. After 200 playlists on your channel, the playlist can only be accessed from YouTube Studio, not from the mobile app, not from the desktop interface the way you'd expect. From the YouTube Studio. I don't know if that's a bug or a feature, but that's how YouTube has operated for the past several years. So there's a real structural constraint to how many playlists you can bounce out of the 200 playlist zone where you can actually add videos efficiently for mobile or desktop. Too few and you can't navigate what's inside them. The taxonomy problem, figuring out what a playlist means, what it represents, when to add another video to it versus when to start a new one. That became the central challenge. And then Quick Pick came out of that. Quick Pick was a branding term. I figured I needed to brand my playlists so people could find them. And Quick Pick was the first thing that came to mind. Self-explanatory. Quick as in quick. Pick as in Pick. Not a complicated spelling, something that could carry consistent search surface area. Something that if somebody else was using it, we could find each other. That was the origin. Watched later stopped being enough. At that moment, that specific moment of reaching for a category specific playlist, for an ASAP playlist, for something beyond the bin, that's where as an aggregator actually starts. Question number 4. The question that cracked the ceiling was simple. Will I actually consume this content as soon as possible? That one question contains an entire doctrine inside it. Because the moment you ask it, you are no longer just saving videos. You are making a decision about time, intent, and priority. So what changes when a content consumer starts asking that question about every video they're about to add to watch later? What changes is conscious competence. You start developing conscious competence in the transition from passive content consumption to active content consumption. Here at As an Aggregator, we say it begins with a title. It begins with a playlist. It begins with an intent. Specifically, the intent around titling that playlist. What is this playlist? What category does this belong to? Is it actually an ASAP quick pick, something I'm committed to consume as soon as possible? Or is it a category specific quick pick, something that belongs to a domain I track over time? Or is it something else, yet to be named, in a taxonomy that's still developing? Before, you were just saving. Now, you're deciding. How long is this video? Am I going to consume it now or later? What's my intent? What type of content is this? Does it even belong in my watch later? Or can I create a playlist that more precisely describes what this video represents? Those are the questions that mark the shift. That is the original origin question, the one beneath all the others. Is it worth creating a new playlist to describe what this video bucket represents? Whether that's temporal, whether that's category specific, whether that's as soon as possible, or another category yet to be described. When you start asking that question, you start developing a playlist taxonomy. You start thinking about time, intent, and priority as real variables, not as abstract concepts, but as things that actually govern where a video goes. That is the technique. That is what changes. You start making decisions instead of deferring them. You start itemizing your consume digest instead of letting it pile up. Will I actually consume this content as soon as possible? One question: time, intent, and priority. It begins with the title. On your screen right now is Crypto 4, a quick pick series related to financialization. Question number 4: watch later is not the enemy. It is the kindergarten. It is where almost every intentional consumer starts before they realize there is a more sophisticated system available to them. So, what does graduating from watch later actually look like? What is the next level of playlist infrastructure that replaces it? And how do you know when you're ready to make that move? The next logical step from watch later is the ASAP Quick Pick. We use Quick Pick as a branding signifier, but you can call it ASAP whatever you want. ASAP insert language, ASAP insert signifier, ASAP blank. The naming convention is yours. Why the ASAP Quick Pick first? Because the hardest part about playlist creation is the taxonomy, the naming conventions you're going to develop over time. And the ASAP Quick Pick solves one specific problem. It is just for as soon as possible content consumption. That's it. Temporal, distinct, vivid. If it goes into the ASAP Quick Pick, you are committing to consuming it soon. That specificity is what makes it a real instrument instead of another bucket. After the ASAP Quick Pick, you move to a category-specific Quick Pick. You start asking, what category does this belong to that's differentiated from the ASAP? And that's crucial. This is a domain playlist, culture commentary, natural science, social science, esoteric. Whatever your lanes are, whatever your domains are, those become the category-specific architecture underneath the ASAP. After that, the temporal playlist, a playlist bounded by a specific moment in time, a month, a quarter, a year, a reflection of what was surfacing at a specific point in your subscription box, not a consumption queue, a record. Remember, Quick Pick is just our signifier. We use it so that people can find our playlists and so we can find each other. You can adopt that naming schema or you can use your own. Leave a comment in the description. How do you title your playlists? Do you have a specific naming convention you've developed? Are you willing to use Quick Picks so we can find each other's playlist? Or is there something more specific, something more precise, or to your practice that you're working with? I want to know. And you know you're ready to graduate from watch later when you're ready to bifurcate. When you're ready to look at a playlist that has too many videos, that's hard to navigate, and say, I need to create a new playlist. For what purpose? For what reason? Start somewhere. Start with a name. If you're getting overwhelmed by the naming schema, start with an ASAP playlist. That's always the right first move. Graduating from watch later looks like using an ASAP quick pick. It looks like using a category specific quick pick. It looks like using a temporal playlist. It looks like making a decision about time, intent, and priority. I'll keep on going back to that. Time, intent, and priority. Before a video just disappears into a bin that stopped being a system 6 months ago. Remember, it begins with a title. That title contains your intent. And that intent is the beginning of something more sophisticated than YouTube's default ever gave you. Watch later was the beginning of a question about what a playlist is actually for, the beginning of a system of recognition that a platform gave you a bin and that you can build a system. The beginning of a practice that starts with one question: will I actually consume this content as soon as possible? That practice is what we build at as an aggregator. If you want to see what that practice looks like in motion, if you want to consume content that has already been through that system, already has been through the taxonomy, already been organized with time, intent, and priority as the governing criteria, go to Mr. Pollock 890. POLIK 890. That is our playlist archive channel. If you're just getting started, go to the Start Here playlist. That's the front door. If you already know what you're looking for, go to the Posts section. Every playlist we have, public or unlisted, is accessible there in our playlists and in our Posts section. Find what matches your consumed digest. Find what belongs in your category specific playlist. Find something you'll actually watch as soon as possible. Remember, watch later was the beginning, but it doesn't have to be where you stay.